Hello and welcome to another episode of Children's Moments here on Heavenward Thinking. Today we're back with another object lesson, so I'll turn it over to Miss Ruth and we'll get started with this week's lesson.
Well, Timothy, tonight we're going to talk about the story of David and Goliath and about the giants that we have to fight. They could be fears, they could be difficulties getting along with people, difficulties liking people, could be fighting with your siblings, which you don't have, or just all different things in our lives that could be a giant. So first we're going to go to read part of the story of David and Goliath from 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm going to read some portions. So we're going to start with verses 20 to 24. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was about to He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. We're going to jump down to verse 32 now and read from 32 to 43. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Then we're going to jump down to verses 45 through 46. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." So let's think about the giant that David had to face. I brought along my yardstick here. Timothy, how big is a yardstick?
3 feet.
Well, if we look up, it describes Goliath in cubits, but if we look at the feet, it would be 9 feet 9 inches. So that would be 3 of these yardsticks. So we'd be getting close to the ceiling in here, wouldn't we, for
sure.
Goliath? And it said David was little more than a boy. He was very small. So imagine being a small boy facing this 9 foot 9 inch giant who had a helmet that weighed, just the helmet on his head weighed 125 pounds, and his spear in his hand weighed 15 pounds. And so hold this yardstick there. So envision that going up 3 times, right from the floor. Put it there on the floor. That's just 1/3 of it. And here's David with just his staff in his hand, a slingshot, and 5 smooth stones. Do you think that's enough to defeat a giant normally?
Not normally.
But David didn't fight in his own strength. He fought with
God's strength.
God's strength. And it just took one of those smooth stones for David to defeat the giant because he went in God's strength. So I wanted to read a couple of the verses that go with this. If we go to Exodus chapter 14, verse 4, it says, "And I 14 verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And then if we go to Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verse 22, it says, do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God himself will fight for you. So we might have a big problem, a big test, a big project for school, a bully we have to face at school, a difficult teacher, someone we're not getting along with, someone that's hard to love. And that can be a giant. A big fear can be a giant in our path. But we just have to put our faith and trust in God, and he fights the battle for us.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you've been encouraged this week by this episode, and that you'll join us next time for another episode of Children's Moments here on Heavenward Thinking.